Hi, you guys. How are you? Good morning. Happy Friday. How's everybody doing this morning? I hope you guys are good. Um, let's see. Um, Let me say good morning to everybody. Good morning, Humanimal. Good morning, Sherry. Ava. Good morning, Adrian. Nate, my boo. Good morning. Good morning, Roro. Good to see you. Let's see. I don't want to miss anybody. Good morning, RJ, Sherry, who knew, Lucia. Good morning. Good morning, Petunia. Good morning, Toe Beans. Good morning, Music City, Lisa, Lee the Bee, Chris, Kelly. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm glad you guys decided to spend your morning with me, and I appreciate that very, very much. How is everybody? Did you guys, who ever celebrates Thanksgiving, did you guys have a good Thanksgiving? I'm sorry that I had to reschedule for this morning because so whenever I scheduled the live yesterday and made the thumbnail and all that stuff, I was in the middle of cooking Thanksgiving dinner. And it was just a small little, it's just the three of us. So I cooked a turkey breast, some dressing, mashed potatoes, and cranberry. That's what everybody wanted. Usually they want macaroni and cheese, but nobody wanted macaroni and cheese. Hey, Maria. Hey, Claudia. Good to see you. So when I scheduled it, I was in the middle of cooking and I was, fine, right? So after I did the cooking and then we ate, and then, me and the hubs were watching. He wanted to watch Fast and the Furious, so we were watching that, and I kind of got like settled in, and the tryptophan kicked in, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I can make it tonight. So I rescheduled. So I'm sorry, you guys. I was sleepy and I had to clean the kitchen and everything. So, that's how sometimes it is like that. I'm sorry. So I wanted to do this like retrospective looking back on the JonBenet Ramsey case, because obviously Netflix just came out with their it's a documentary. It's done in 3 parts, and it's done by Joe Berlinger, who I actually am a huge fan of. Joe, the first documentary I ever saw that Joe Berlinger did was the West Memphis 3 documentaries, Paradise Lost series. There are 3 of those. It was Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky. And I make this plea every time I mention their names. They are, as far as I know, the only people that have both of those trials captured in their entirety on film. And I wish this every year, because there's so much that they didn't show in the documentaries, that I just think watching those trials in their entirety would be interesting, and I wish that they would release those. So anywho, that's that. But so they did. So Joe Berlinger did a documentary on Netflix. Like I said, the 3-part documentary, and I watched it. It was released Monday. Um, it's um, it's done well. It's got some interesting parts to it. It's there are like a I don't want to say like new information, because the case is almost 30 years old. It'll be 28 years, December 26th. So it's not new information per se. It's more in-depth information. Um, and what I will say it doesn't do is it does not put forward an actual theory of what happened in between when the Ramseys got home from December 25th or, from Christmas dinner at their friend's house through December 26th, when, up until John Ramsey finds JonBenet's body in the basement. It doesn't really put forward a theory, which I actually appreciated. But what it does do is it does talk, it of course breaks down the dynamic in the Ramsey home. It talks about that December, not so much the 25th really, but the 26th, so it does a good job of, like, if you, for whatever reason, for some, maybe you're young, okay, and you don't know. Like, my kids wouldn't know this story because my oldest son was born in 95 and my youngest son was born in September of 96. So and my daughters were born in 1998 and 2005, so they wouldn't know this story. So what I would say is, if you are in that category, but you like true crime and you don't know anything about this case, it's a good documentary to catch you up on the events of the case. Like, it does a really good job talking about the case itself. It gives you a good overall of the backstory of the case. So for that, I thought it was good. And I also did, like I said, I really appreciated the fact that it did not give a theory on what happened that night, because most of the specials that have come before this one do. Like, there was one on Oxygen, there was one on A&E, and they were really heavy on the theory of what they believe took place. Especially, I think it's the Oxygen one where Dr. Henry Lee, where Dr. Henry Lee is featured in the show. And he is, for those who may not know, Dr. Henry Lee is a forensic pathologist. He testified during the O.J. Simpson murder trial. He's extremely experienced, extremely educated, and extremely knowledgeable. You know what, Nadine? I think I will. Nay asks, wrong one. Nay says that, you going to tell us your theory, Bindi? Yeah, I'll tell you what I think happened. I think that there was an intruder. I think that there was an intruder, and it was a stranger. And now what I'll say is, I use the term stranger in this instance because I think it was somebody that likely watched the Ramseys, in particular JonBenet. I think that the person was most likely not known by the family, meaning probably somebody who came and did work on the home at some point, and while they were working on the home, they saw JonBenet and became fixated. That is what I think. I think that, so yesterday, the behavior panel premiered an analysis on, they analyzed John Ramsey, Burke Ramsey, and Patsy Ramsey. Now, I can't play that because Burke Ramsey, the analysis that they do on Burke comes from Dr. Phil. When Burke Ramsey went on Dr. Phil, and even if I just show 2 seconds of that, because it is a very small, what they use is a very, very short clip. But it will get a copyright claim. So it was very brief what the clip that they analyzed of Burke Ramsey, but the analysis of Burke was rather in depth. And I will say that they did a analysis of Patsy Ramsey's interview, and that's an interview we're going to play. That they analyzed her behavior 2 years ago, and I watched that one also. And what I will say is there is a departure a little bit from what they said 2 years ago to what they say today. And what I will tell you is, it seems to me, I think they were careful in what they said about Burke, and I'll tell you why. Because Burke Ramsey sued CBS for defamation and won. It was a settlement, okay? And so I think that given that set of circumstances, everyone is very careful about the words that they choose to speak about Burke, including myself. I don't need that smoke. So, and the truth is that there is a documented instance that Burke did hit JonBenet prior to the murders, with a golf club in the head. That is documented. Does that mean that he would be capable? He was 9 years old at the time. The Burke theory has always, it's an interesting theory, but it's not supported by the majority of the physical evidence. Okay, so there is physical evidence in this. There's DNA evidence that doesn't match anybody in that house. So for that fact alone, that kind of rules out Burke. Burke Ramsey Lucia is JonBenet Ramsey's older brother. So John and Patsy Ramsey together have 2 children. John Ramsey has 3 children from a previous marriage, 2 daughters and a son. One of his daughters, Beth, died tragically in a car accident. So, yeah. So there's 3 years between Burke and JonBenet. So he's older by 3 years. So for me, the Burke theory doesn't really hold much water because of the DNA evidence. However, one of the things that they talked about, and I'm going to warn you now, there's no way for me to talk about some of the things that I want to talk about today without giving a few spoilers to the Netflix documentary. But like I said, the Netflix documentary isn't new information. It just goes in depth. It goes in depth and into information that we already knew, like Michael Carr, the man who claimed responsibility for taking JonBenet's life. It goes more into depth with that. Now I'll not spoil some of that, but as far as the DNA goes, one of the John Ramsey for years and years and years has been begging the state of Colorado to try and see if is DNA on other items that were collected on the 26th. Okay. And one of the issues is, so when they had new suspects like Michael Carr, for example, one of the first things that they did was to compare his DNA, and it was not found to be a match. However, one of the things that is stated in this documentary on Netflix is that there may be an issue with the DNA in that sample, that it was contaminated. And so the the comparisons, likely the comparisons from the suspects that they've used, likely where they were ruled out, may not be accurate, because there's something, they don't say specifically what the issue is with the DNA and why, but that's the situation. So there's that. And I will tell you, there were things that were spoken about with Michael Carr that, quite frankly, will make every person uncomfortable. It's, I did not realize that Michael Carr had been communicating with a private investigator for the Ramseys for years and years and years and years, before we ever heard of him, before there was the arrest, before all of that. And so I thought, that part was definitely interesting, and I guess new. That would be new, because I didn't know that. But just because I didn't know it, see, I'm trying to be very careful here, because, just because I didn't know something doesn't mean it was new. So let me just say this. It was new to me. How about that? So yeah, there's that. And like I said, the communication, the things that were communicated between this private investigator and Michael Carr, when you listen to it, are just, ugh. I mean, it's a hard listen. I'm not going to lie. So I definitely want to prepare you guys for that. So for me, with the DNA, okay. In my opinion, and just from like all the stuff that I've ever like watched, true crime related, and experts, like Dr. Henry Lee, Dr. Michael Baden, Werner Spitz, Dr. Werner Spitz, their tests, just things that I've learned along the way. People hear DNA and automatically, they're like, oh, okay. For me personally, DNA has a different meaning depending on where the DNA came from. Okay. So for example, if there were, say, and the type of DNA that it is, right? So for me, say there was touch DNA found on like a bedpost. Does that mean something? Well, sure. But if you take JonBenet's, the Ramsey home, the morning of the 26th, it was busy as an airport, and all kinds of things were going on. Okay, there were people gathered there to support the Ramseys, but they weren't just sitting around, just waiting for this ransom call that never did come. They were cleaning. They were cleaning the kitchen. They were, making coffee, laying out, coffee and some, like snacks and whatnot. So it's not like people were just standing around, and not touching anything. They were milling around the house. You don't have to, Humanimal, you don't have to leave, babe. Listen, I'm going to get there. I'm not all the way awake, so be patient with me, and we're going to talk about it. Okay? You can have a different opinion. I think that you're not being rude by expressing your opinion, babe. It's fine. You stay. Okay? You can stay. I'm not, I haven't, we're going to talk about all the things. And it's absolutely, I want everybody to know this is not an echo chamber. I don't even like the sound of my own voice. So for me to have an echo chamber would be miserable for me. I want everybody to have their opinion. I want everybody to express their opinion. I mean, you're expressing your opinion, it's different, Humanimal. It's not like you're saying, God, Jen Lu, what a big dummy you are. You're stupid. Why would you think that? That makes no sense. That would be like a step too far, right? Just having that opinion is, just having a different opinion is not a negative. Stay, babe, stay. Okay, so that morning, right? Let's just start at the beginning. Let's start with that morning. All right. So there were a bunch of people milling around the house, touching, moving, I think that it's safe to say, and I don't think anybody would argue with this, that the home wasn't treated as a crime scene. And it should have been, and I'm going to say why. And I'm going to segue into something else after that. Okay. It would be different. JonBenet was 6 years old. Okay. The circle of people around a 6-year-old is so much smaller. Their little circle is so much smaller than, say, a high schooler, right? High schoolers have a huge circle of friends, and friends in high school is a very, very, it's a loose description, right? Because you know how it is in high school. You have like your core group of people that you're like super close to, that you tell everything to, but then you have people that are your friends, right? But you're not as close to them. So the DNA. All right. So let's get back to the DNA. Anyway, no. Let me just stop right there. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm super, super disjointed this morning. I don't really know what's going on inside of my brain, but it's having a difficult time staying on task. All right. So JonBenet's circle it's much smaller than, say somebody who is like, in high school. So the home, because there was a ransom note found, that means somebody had to come into that home, remove JonBenet, right, and leave that ransom note, which we'll later find out and learn that it's likely, highly likely, that the ransom note was actually written on a pad of paper from the Ramseys' home. Okay, so this theory of it being an abduction for ransom is preposterous because, first of all, if that were the case, obviously JonBenet would have not been found in the home. I mean, if you're holding a child or if you're holding anybody for ransom, frankly, the thing is you're waiting to get money, right? Or whatever it is that you're trying to get by keeping this person alive. And she obviously was not alive. That's number one. Number two, if your whole intent is, again, to abduct and hold a person for ransom, one would think that you would come supplied with your own ransom note, your own demand. It seems like just about everything used in this crime came from inside the home. And obviously, there was no ransom, no call. They said they would call at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock came and went. There was no call. Nevertheless, just from the very beginning, right, you would think that the police would treat this as the home as a crime scene just based off of the information from the 911 call alone, right? The claim is that an intruder broke in, they kidnapped JonBenet, and they left a ransom note. So that would be why why it should have been treated as a crime scene immediately. Okay. Then so that was a problem from jump. So many people that were allowed in and out and in and out in that house over the 26th, starting on the 26th and in the days to follow, which after the crime scene is contaminated initially, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But they didn't even seem to recognize, even after her body was found, that the home was a crime scene, and try to preserve the crime scene. I know that on the actual day of the 26th, the Ramseys, after JonBenet's body was found, Burke was, after the 911 call was made, Burke was sent to some friends of Patsy and John. So he wasn't there. And then after JonBenet's body was found, the Ramseys stayed at a friend's house. They also went down and talked to police, but they stayed at a friend's house. So there was a short period of time where the house was treated as a crime scene, and whatever could be collected at that point, I guess, was collected and photographed and all of the things, right, as it were. So in that process, okay, one of the first things that investigators did when they arrived on scene was to collect that ransom note. And they took that ransom note and had the CBI look at it. And that's when it was discovered that it came from a notebook pad that was already in John and Patsy Ramsey's home. And along with the ransom note was handwriting samples taken by John and Patsy Ramsey. Okay. So that happened. We later find out that there is DNA that was found in JonBenet's underwear that doesn't match anyone. And so going back to the DNA, different DNA has different meanings, and where it's found has different meanings. And bedpost is probably the worst example that I could have used in this situation, since JonBenet was taken from her bed. Okay, so let's throw away the bedpost example and let me give an example that would be more fitting. Let's say that there is touch DNA found on a doorknob in the home, like one of the bathrooms, okay? Where that becomes problematic in this case would be because they there was a tour that was given in that home showing off, the Christmas decorations and whatnot. So there were already strangers in their home. So that touch DNA, the DNA found in her underpants is significant because there's very little room for a reasonable explanation in that scenario. So that's where I guess the difference is for me. Okay. That to me, the DNA in the underpants is quite significant. Here we go. Humanimal's correcting me. It's been a minute, you guys. Thank you, Humanimal. So Humanimal says, in previous years, they'd opened up the home. On 23rd, they made gingerbread houses hosting a small party. And they did they not have one of the neighbors or come and play Santa? Did that not happen? So that, what I'm saying is, there were people in the house prior. So have that party. So there would be DNA that didn't match on doorknobs. There would, but what I'm saying is why I think that the DNA on the underwear is significant is because there's really no reasonable explanation for there to be a stranger's DNA on the underpants. That's my point. There's just not a reasonable, explanation for that. So one of the theories that Scott said yesterday, which I thought was quite interesting, and I had not considered before, was that he noted, specifically with Patsy Ramsey, that actually all four of them did. They noted some indicators of guilty knowledge when she, in some of her statements in her interviews. And Scott's theory, which I got to say, guys, I found this one to be quite interesting, and I'm curious what you guys will think. What he said is he thinks that it's possible that the reason that they did what they she might be showing consciousness of guilt is because initially they thought that Burke might have been the one that did it. And so the ransom note was written in an effort to distract away from the fact that they thought that Burke might have done it. And then when it came out that there was other, that it could have actually potentially been a stranger, that they were too far into it. And so they had to they couldn't really talk about that anymore. You know what I mean? So that's why when they're discussing some of the events that happened that morning, that Patsy shows indicators of guilty knowledge. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting for him to say that, because it does explain some things, but anyway, that's just one of the theories. The other theory that came up over the years is that there are marks on JonBenet's face and her back that would match a stun gun. And Lou Smith said he shows this picture of JonBenet's bed, because this is one of the first photographs that was taken on the 26th. And in that photograph, the way that the fitted sheet is, it does sort of look like somebody dragged her off of that bed. And because there's like this, I don't know how to really describe it other than, you know how a fitted sheet, it's just exactly what it says. It's supposed to be fitted and tight to the mattress. But you know how, like in the morning when you wake up, when you've been, if you've had like a rough night, you tossed and turned, how there'll be like parts of that fitted sheet that are like pushed together in a fold upward. That's what it looked like. And so it did sort of, I could see his point, that they were, that it looked like somebody had pulled her off of the bed. So the cops are, at the house, and, the ransom call doesn't come. So one of the officers suggests that John Ramsey and his friend search the house just in case there is a place that they have not looked. And the way that the Ramseys' house is set up is kind of interesting, particularly the basement, because the basement is, while it's one floor and it is the whole, it's the whole underground floor, right? There's several rooms to that basement. And there's this is where JonBenet is found by John, her father. There's this one room. They keep saying that nobody this would be a very difficult room to find if you did not live there, if you were not familiar with the house, because it was, difficult to find that room. It was off of another room, and it was tiny, and it had a window, and it was, I guess what they called, the kids had a room down there they called that the train room or whatever. But like the opposite argument of that would be if you were an intruder and you were walking around the outside of the home, there were windows in that room. And so you would be, if you entered through that window, then obviously you would be in that room. So that's, there are, I'm just going to say how the evidence is, and I'm going to give 1 point for the, one side, which it would be the intruder, and 1 point for somebody in the home, right? And I'm going to let you guys make up your minds. I already said my theory, and, so now we can just move forward from there. Okay. So John and his friend find JonBenet Ramsey. And she's, on the floor in this room. There's the open window, and there is a suitcase underneath the window. And he sees her, goes to her, takes the duct tape off of her mouth. She's got a garrote around, I don't know why I said it like that, a garrote around her neck, which is fairly intricate in the way that the knots were tied. And it's almost like embedded in her neck. And what I'm saying is, let me make it more clear. He finds her in a room off of the room that had the window open and the suitcase. Sorry, I should be more clear. He sees the room with the open window and the suitcase, and JonBenet is she's in a room off of that room. Okay. So he goes to her, he takes the duct tape off. She's got that garrote why can't I say it right? Garrote around her neck. It's embedded in her skin. And she's not alive. And he picks her up with the white blanket and carries her upstairs and basically lays her, which I always thought was odd, like in front of the Christmas tree. that I never understood that part. That part to me kind of never made sense. And it it almost felt like, I'm just going to say it, fuck it, like he put her on display to put her in front of the Christmas tree. I just thought that was it. That part of it always was like odd to me. It just was like, and the thing of it is, there, in all the retelling of the story, and maybe I've missed it because I mean, I've watched almost everything there is to watch on this case, but it doesn't mean that I have clearly total recall of everything that I've ever watched, right? But in all the things that I've ever watched about this, John, when he retells the story of finding JonBenet, he doesn't say that he like gasped or screamed or had any like audible emotion. And I always just thought that was like odd, you know? And nobody that's talked about being there that day either says that. Now, not everybody reacts the same to situations. I think we have established that. I think that's very, very clear. Everybody has their own way of coping and dealing with things and their own reaction. I just always thought that it was odd just because it seems like it would be natural to have a reaction more out of shock, like scared. You know, like, have you ever, walked into a room and flipped on the light and realized, oh gosh, somebody's, like one of your family members or your kid is in the room and you didn't see him and you're like, oh, you're surprised. That is what it's just that it didn't seem like he was like, it just surprised me that he didn't have like an initial emotional reaction. I think that the taking the duct tape off of her mouth might have been explained as, or could be explained as him doing that, like trying to, not your body. I can only tell you my experience. Okay. When I went to go see my mom, okay, and they had her on the gurney, and I wanted to hold her hand, and I've told this story before, and I lifted the sheet, not thinking that my mom was found at home, so she went for an autopsy, so I was going to see the white incision. That thought never crossed my mind. What I wanted to do was hold my mom's hand because I felt so sad that she was there and she was alone. That was an initial reaction for me, seeing somebody that I love very much no longer alive. Okay. So it is possible that the taking off of the duct tape was something similar to that. I don't know. So anyway, I think that what I'm saying is it's possible. I'm not saying that's what it was, because a lot of people have described John as very cold and unemotional. And what I will say about that is this: he may be cold and unemotional, and that just may be who he is. Or he may present as cold and unemotional, but but inside is feeling all the feelings all at once. He just doesn't show them. That's also possible. So, and when I talk about trying to, wanting to hold my mom's hand, it wasn't like an actual thought process in that moment. The thought process is me today on November 29th at 10:19 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, reflecting on that moment back in 2015, okay, on March 31st of 2015. That's what that is for me. Or April. I think it might have been April. See, it's all a blur. So anyway, that's me reflecting back. In that moment, I just wanted to hold her hand. So let's get to listening to this interview that took place in 2016. Let's just hear back some of the things that are said by Patsy and John Ramsey at that time. And we'll, because they're going to obviously reflect on all of the things that happened that day. So we'll just go through each thing one by one and just talk about it. Does that sound good? Rather than me just sitting up here pontificating. All right, so let me rewind this and add it to the stream for you guys. All right, here we go.
Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, let's revisit what Governor Bill Owens said on national television this morning. He said that you were hiding behind your public relations people, your attorneys, and now you were hiding behind easy journalism. He specifically said, why hadn't you talked with Peter Jennings and Tom Brokaw? Your response, Mrs. Ramsey.
As a woman, I am appalled that he said that. I consider Barbara Walters and Katie Couric to be one of the two most professional, experienced journalists in our country today.
Yeah, that's a remarkable comment. We specifically decided to go with Barbara Walters and Katie Couric because they are tops in their field and they're tough. And we didn't want to be criticized for not being challenged. They were open-ended interviews, no time limit, no restrictions. They demanded and got from us the right to ask us any question on camera that they chose to ask.
We're not hiding behind anyone.
And let me say one more time, we said this the last time the governor accused us of hiding behind our attorneys and PR firm. We have no PR firm. There were no attorneys present at the Barbara Walters interview or the Katie Couric interview. There are no attorneys present here.
All right. Now, this is something that has come up so many, many times with respect to John and Patsy Ramsey. Okay. From the beginning, there was a contentious relationship with law enforcement between the Ramseys and there was a contentious relationship between the Ramseys and law enforcement. There have been interviews subsequently where, the Ramseys have said that they were told somebody from inside law enforcement contacted somebody that they knew, and the Ramseys were told that law enforcement is coming for you, they suspect you, and you better get yourselves a damn good attorney. And from that moment, and that's why there was such contention between the Ramseys and law enforcement. They were criticized because they would speak to the media but would not speak to law enforcement without their lawyers present. A lot has been made about that. And this is what I'll say about that. This is my feeling about lawyers versus not lawyers. I don't think it's ever a good idea to speak to law enforcement without an attorney present. If unless you, let me leave it there. That is why they get Miranda. You get the Miranda warning because you do have that right. The difference between the John and Patsy Ramseys of the world and the Jen Lews of the world is that I would have to ask for I would have to tell law enforcement, I need a lawyer appointed to me. Whereas John and Patsy Ramseys of the world would be able to get a lawyer to come down with them that moment before, come down with them before talking to law enforcement. Like that would already be arranged. I would have to request one. That's the difference. And I think that sometimes part of the reason that people feel the way they do about John and Patsy Ramsey, some of it has to do with the fact that they behave in a manner that is snooty, persnickety, bougie, because they have money. They're not like regular people. So they're at the way that they would react to a situation respective to hiring attorneys is very different than the way the average person would. Money doesn't make you a better person. Money doesn't make you happy. Money, these are not better people because they have money. All money does is give you more options. That's just the way that it is. So that is a lot of the reason why people found them to be unlikable because they had access to resources, frankly, that the average parent in this situation would not have had.
Today.
And no restrictions.
And no restrictions.
Were you nervous about talking with either one of those newswomen?
We respected them as journalists. We knew that they would be tough because the world expected them to be tough. We weren't nervous. There's no question that we could be asked that we're afraid to answer. The truth is easy.
Truth doesn't change. It's not frightening. It's not anything. It's the truth, and that's all it is.
What do you miss most about your daughter, Mrs. Ramsey?
I miss her butterfly kisses. She used to come up and give me a little brush with her eyelashes on my cheek, and her little hugs and her spontaneity.
She was a spark plug in our life. She kept the place rocking. Mm-hmm. It's a huge vacuum in our family, all of our family.
It is said that no parent should ever lose their child. You have lost 2 children. Mm-hmm. How do you survive?
You survive first because you have other children that need you to survive.
It's not easy.
That's the first thing that you realize, is that I can feel desperately sorry for myself, but I have other children that depend on me now more than ever. We still have 3 wonderful, precious children. We have a grandchild on the way, which we're thrilled about. And you keep going because you're their parent. You have to.
And it doesn't mean that you keep going 100% all the time. There are days when I'm in bed crying my eyes out for the whole day. You know, it's kind of an up and down situation. It's not easy, but we're here with a mission to find the killer of our daughter. So yes, we will sit here as long as you'd like to sit and ask us questions. And tomorrow I may be in my bed crying myself to sleep. But I'm going to do that until we find this person.
And there will be people who watch this and say, as you say that, we want to find the killer. They'll say, well, you are the killer.
You know,
Look, we're never going to convince cynics of the truth, so we don't try to. What we're trying to do is solicit help from the public to find this creature and to beg the Colorado officials to be at least objective and open enough to listen when that tip comes through. Then we'll find this person.
What's going on with this hatred and obsession and fringe?
I don't know. What we've learned through all this, we've come out of this realizing there are a lot of good people in the world. We've had wonderful people come forward and support us from all over the world. And even though you'd think that we would come out of this being hateful and want to go to a mountain retreat and fence ourselves off from the world, we realize there are some wonderful, good people in the world. But we also realize that there's some very fundamentally evil, bad people in the world. That's a fact. We were naive about that, but it exists. There are more good people than bad, but the bad exists. And we're never going to change that. And we're not trying to convince the bad people and the cynics and the hateful people that we loved our daughter and that we didn't kill her. We're trying to appeal to the good people and say, let's find this evil creature that's among us and put him away, because this person will kill another child.
Do you want him to contact you?
I would be desperate for a contact. At a minimum, please leave. You've done a crime that has captured world attention. Please tell somebody about it.
Why?
Because ultimately, we want to know who you are.
And why does that person care what you think?
That person, I'm sure, doesn't care what we think at all. I'm sure that person, we've been told that person was either very angry at me or was very jealous of me personally, and that's a heavy burden for me to carry. But this person should tell someone that they're the one.
Mrs. Ramsey?
Okay, that last bit, that John Ramsey said just then about that the person who did this is angry at him or jealous of him. I would argue that to me, it seems that the person was very angry and at JonBenet because of what happened. I feel like, first of all, a garrote is something that is a fairly obscure weapon, if you will. And again, it was something, what was used to fashion the garrote, what came from inside the home, which, okay, if you go with the stranger theory, obviously the ransom theory, like that's just ridiculous. That's I have no, that makes no, it makes no sense because JonBenet was immediately found that same day. Okay. So later that morning. So at the end of the day, obviously there was no ransom, because the threat in the ransom note was that if they didn't pay the $118,000, that they would behead JonBenet Ramsey. Well, at the end of the day, she was already deceased. So that theory is ridiculous. That was not a motive for the crime, right? But if we go with the stranger theory, right, this would mean that the person who did this came into that home wholly and fully unprepared to take her life. They had nothing with them. All they knew, let's say they were watching the house. This is the stranger theory, right? All they knew is that the Ramseys left the house. Did they know how they couldn't? Maybe they did know where they were going. Okay. But how would they know what time they would come back? How did they know that when they left, maybe they didn't forget, maybe they forgot something and had to quickly turn around and come right back, thus catching this person in the act of breaking into their home? How did they, it's weird that it's not that it couldn't have happened. It's just that, there's a lot of things that have to have lined up just perfectly in order for this crime to take place this way, being a stranger, right? They had to know, they could have come home at any time. So I just always, it's, I don't know. The stranger theory, I mean, sometimes I have I vacillate back and forth between, like everybody does, between a stranger, and by stranger, I simply mean somebody outside of the home, not a resident or a member of the Ramsey family. That would probably be better to use. An outsider would be a better term to use than stranger. All right, they're about to ask Patsy something, so let's hear what they ask Patsy.
Ramsey, do you want to ever talk to this person? The person you believe killed your daughter?
Of course I would, because I'd like to know who it is, get them off the streets. And if I had the opportunity, I would sit down and look straight in the eye and say, why? Why did you do this to my child? Why?
Let's go over some of the assumptions if we can. I believe you call them the urban myths in your book. And let's just go over them and get your responses. There were conflicting versions, Mr. Ramsey, that you read to your daughter that night, or that you put her to bed and read a book. Which was it?
We saw there were a number of errors in the police report. That was one of them. I carried JonBenet upstairs. She was asleep when we got home. I put her to bed. I got Burke to bed, and I went upstairs and I read for a few minutes before I fell asleep. I didn't read to her because she was asleep.
Okay. And Mrs. Ramsey, you are the one who last saw her.
Yes.
In your family. The pineapple.
Okay, I was just thinking about the pineapple. One thing that I will say, and this is just an absolute, our favorite Judge Bev sidebar, is I appreciate the fact that the camera person is wanting close-ups of John and Patsy Ramsey so that the viewers can see the expressions on their face, potentially any micro expressions, whatnot. But it's giving me a little bit of the Blair Witch vibe when they, switch it back and forth. They move the camera quickly like that. I'm not a fan of that. I just wanted to point that out. Gives me like a feeling of a little bit of seasickness. But this is an important thing too about the pineapple, because pineapple was found in JonBenet's stomach contents. And it's hard for me because she's 6. She's just a little kid, and the way that you have to refer to things that were found at autopsy a lot of times takes the humanity and out of the victim. And I don't like to do that too much, but I also don't want to be, this is true crime. It is. We have to talk about these things. All right, here we go.
What about the pineapple? The autopsy revealed pineapple, yet neither of you recall pineapple.
Well, I've not specifically read the autopsy report, but it is my understanding that they are not definitive about whether the substance in her digestive system was pineapple or not. All I'm saying is that I did not feed her pineapple when we returned home from the White's house. She was sound asleep. She was put in her bed and tucked in good night.
Yeah, we don't know if that's significant or not. All we know is what we've told the police, and that is that neither Patsy or I gave JonBenet pineapple when we got home that night. Had we been trying to hide something, it would be very easy for us to say, oh yeah, I remember I gave her pineapple before she went to bed. Next question. But that's not what happened.
Footprints outside the house. No evidence of footprints.
Now, I will say this. The stomach contents are important because it is an indicator of time of death, and also when the events preceding the death. Okay, stomach contents are important, and whatever it turns out, whatever it is that it was in JonBenet's stomach, seems to me like it would have occurred farther in time after dinner at the White's house. That just it seems to me somebody fed her something that likely came from her own home versus something that she had at the dinner. That's my point. Okay.
I think it said no footprints in the snow. And we have seen photographs that were taken the morning of the 26th
By the police.
Of each of the door.
All right, so let's rewind this situation with the pineapple and find out exactly what the reporter is asking them relative to that. See, okay, I see it right now. All right, let's rewind this.
Family. The pineapple. What about the pineapple? The autopsy revealed pineapple, yet neither of you recall pineapple.
Well, I've not specifically read the autopsy report, but it is my understanding that they are not definitive about whether the substance in her digestive system was pineapple or not.
Okay, now I will say this is I missed this part the first time around, but hearing it again is the way that Patsy explains this. The words that she chooses to use are quite interesting here. I said stomach contents, right? Patsy said, I haven't specifically read the autopsy report, which is a legal way of covering yourself that you can't get backed into a corner. It's not a definitive it's not a declarative statement. It's not an emphatic statement where, for example, I did not read a book to JonBenet because JonBenet was asleep. That's definitive. Okay? That is making a definitive declarative statement about a specific incident, leaving no room if it turns out that new evidence comes out or whatever that, then you have to explain later. You don't, when you use the term, it is my understanding, it's a way of not getting backed into a corner. You've not made such a statement that they could come back at later and say, you said this, but then this happened. Did you take my meaning? So what I'm saying is, her using the term digestive system is very different than stomach contents. And I looked at the autopsy report a long, long time ago. And I thought that I remembered it as stomach contents, but everybody in the chat is pointing out that it is her digestive system, which is something different entirely. The stomach is the stomach. The digestive system is all of the rest of it. So I think that that's, interesting that Patsy uses a very specific term to correct the interviewer without correcting the interviewer.
All I'm saying is that I did not feed her pineapple when we returned home from the White's house. She was sound asleep. She was put in her bed and tucked in good night.
Yeah, we don't know if that's significant or not. All we know is what we've told the police, and that is that neither Patsy or I gave JonBenet pineapple when we got home that night. Had we been trying to hide something, it would be very easy for us to say, oh yeah, I remember I gave her a pineapple before she went to bed. Next question. But that's not what happened.
Footprints outside the house. No evidence of footprints.
I think it said no footprints in the snow. And we have seen photographs that were taken the morning of the 26th
By the police.
by the police of each of the door entries and around the house, and there was no snow. Urban myth.
Mr. Ramsey, you left the house to get mail.
Okay, now let me say this. I normally perk my ears up at a person arguing semantics, okay? Because what usually, it depends on the argument, right? And it depends on what semantics they're arguing, okay? Because usually, when somebody is arguing the meaning, what the meaning of is, it's because they don't have any other argument to make that's actually valid to in the debate. However, in this situation, what I'll say is there is a difference in saying there were no footprints found outside of the home versus saying there were no footprints found in the snow outside of the home. And obviously, the argument over whether or not there was snow would be important, okay? And obviously, snow, if you walk through snow, you are going to leave a path with your feet through the snow, okay? However, if it's already fallen snow and there isn't any more snow happening, right? Of course, those footprints would be preserved. That would make sense, weather, science, okay? However, if you're walking through the snow and it's actively snowing and it's continuing to snow for for a long period of time, and it's a lot of snow, eventually those footprints will be covered up. However, the way that I understand the weather from that night was that it was a light dusting of snow, and that there was not accumulated snow consistently all around the home. As Kelly points out, let me highlight this for the people on replay, that, and let me just take this off. I don't know why this is doing this. Give me just a second because it's driving me nuts now. Let me turn, there we go. That's better. All right. So Kelly says, crime scene photos show there was no snow in the front. There was snow. Excuse me. Let me start again. Crime scene photos show there was snow in the front of the house, but there was no snow on the sides or back of the house, which I remember that also. That's the way that I remember it. So I find normally, like I said, semantics is one of those things that when somebody starts to argue semantics, I sort of side eye. But in this situation, under these circumstances, I don't actually think what Patsy is arguing is semantics. I think she's arguing details, and I will also say that it is my opinion that most often, like 99% of the time, the devil is in the details, and the details do matter. So I'm not going to fault Patsy for sort of correcting this, because the details are important. And also, as the country life of Chicken Lady points out, is snow sticks to certain surfaces quicker also, as well as melts quicker. And there's a lot of factors into this, right? So the snow that you would get, let's say, in North Texas, okay, is different than the snow that they get in Colorado. First of all, while snow does happen in North Texas, which is where I'm from, it doesn't happen that often. And usually when it does happen, the first time it happens, it doesn't always stick around the initial time because the ground is still warm. Now, we have had winters in North Texas where we've gotten snow and sleet and been, the whole part of North Texas has pretty much been shut down because it does happen it's not a regular occurrence. And so when it happens and it happens like that, we kind of have to shut down because we aren't really used to it and we're not experienced to drive in it. So there's a huge difference, Boulder, Colorado gets snow in the wintertime. That's like a regular occurrence. So it's a little bit different.
That I heard that. I don't know where that came from. Our mailbox is not outside. There's a slot in the door. There was a pile of envelopes at the foot of the door inside the house. I was desperately looking for another communication from the kidnapper. Phone, mail, I didn't know how it was going to come. I went through those envelopes to see if there was anything else from the kidnapper. We'd just gotten a letter, a 3-page ransom note on the back stairs. I was hopeful that there was another communication. My question is, why didn't the police do that?
Mrs. Ramsey,
I have a question. I've always had a question about this. And so Tinkerbell says, oh, wow, I've lived in North Texas for 14 years. So you know what I'm talking about. Snowmageddon. In 2000, what was it, 2010? Yeah, because I remember Snowmageddon in 2000. Yeah, because my chocolate lab Nestor was born in 2009 in December, and we went to get him in January of 2010, and we had been snowed in or iced in for like, I don't know, it felt like a week. It's been so long, but 3, 4, 5 days. And the roads were just clear enough for us to drive. And we drove all the way from Frisco, Texas to East Texas to get him. So, yeah. Bogart says, don't move to Canada. We get tons of snow like now. Yeah, the Canadas is like penguin land. No, thank you. I'll stay here in the Floridas where we don't get that kind of ridiculous weather. Now, one of the things about the mail is confusing to me, and it has to do, I think, more with the layout of the home. Okay. So John Ramsey is saying that they had one of the old-fashioned mail slots that's on the door. Okay. Which door, I guess, is the front door? Because there were a pile of envelopes. All right. Where he's not, let me rewind this because these are the questions I have, and I'm going to rewind it so we can, oh my gosh, Tinkerbell, that's crazy. So it's a small world. Okay. So this is the question that I have. All right. With the mail. Obviously, the mail didn't get there on the 25th of December because, hello, Christmas. No mail runs on Christmas. All right. Where was this pile of envelopes located? Was the pile of envelopes located on the floor? Had they been, okay, were they just sitting there and that's what he went over there to look at? Or, because I mean, people were coming over. So what door were they coming in? What door were they letting people in? Because it would seem to me that perhaps people who knew the Ramseys might knock on a different entry door because they're familiar with the home, but law enforcement would most definitely knock at the front door. That just makes sense, right? So where were these envelopes? When did they come? If there was this pile, is he talking about they came on the 24th? Or was the mail delivered at some point on the 26th? So let me look and see what day the 26th of December was back in 1996. Let's keep listening while I do that.
That morning?
No, I did not.
Okay. This is Ramsey, the 911 call. There are contradictions about whether or not the phone was hung up and whether or not your son Burke came downstairs and was talking. Some police officers believe that they can hear that on an enhanced audio tape. Others say no. What do you say?
Well, we have not heard the 911 tape, but we understand from people who have heard it that it sounds like a bunch of chipmunks chattering, and that it is.
I wouldn't describe it that way, Mrs. Ramsey. Okay. So December 26th was December 26th, 1996 was Thursday. So the mail would have run. Oh, Neat Noodle, you're doing just fine, babe. Don't you worry. You're doing just fine. This is just chill. Everybody's behaving and being good to each other, and I will say this. I've heard the enhanced version of the 911 call, and it absolutely does not sound like chipmunks chattering at all.
Almost unintelligible.
It's not almost
All we know
unintelligible.
is that Burke did not come downstairs that morning, nor did we say to him, go back, or whatever it is they say that it's said on the 911 tape. I phoned the police, called 911 from the kitchen telephone, wall phone, hung up, dialed one set of our friends, hung up, and dialed another set of friends and asked them to come quickly to help.
How soon after that 911 call did you dial the first?
Immediately. So it seems to me like if you hang up the phone, you're not going to be able to place another call unless the phone is completely.
Look, this is another, there's been no logic applied.
Well, I have to say, okay, now, I don't know how I would handle a situation like what the Ramseys are describing happened when, early morning on December 26th. Okay. I hope I never have to find out. I could understand calling one person right? Calling one person after you call 911 because, they have another child. And I can understand wanting somebody to come and get your other child because of under the circumstances. That makes sense to me. But calling a lot of people to come over and help, especially when the ransom note specifically says in one part of it, if we see you talking to a stray dog, that part doesn't really make sense to me. Calling a bunch of people over when the note says that they're watching you. That part of it, that part's never made sense to me. It's almost like they didn't take the threat seriously. It's also interesting that it seems like they never even paused and argued over whether or not to involve the police.
Applied to any of this case, in my judgment. Again, if we were trying to hide something, we'd say, oh yeah, I remember, Burke did get up and I told him to go back to bed. Next question. But the fact of the matter is, that didn't happen.
They're grasping at straws instead of trying to get down to brass tacks and find this killer.
I would love...
Why are they doing this?
I don't know why. I think they became so invested early on. They decided that John and I were responsible, and everything, if it didn't fit into that basket, then they discarded it. And they went down that road for so long that now they can't, they're going to be the ones with egg on their face, and they can't face that.
But these...
Okay, now what I will say is I was just sitting here thinking about all of those things that they're saying and, talking about, an outsider theory, the outsider perp theory versus a family member perp theory. I kind of, if like John Ramsey says here, and this is an old interview. This is from 2016, you guys, obviously, because Patsy's still alive. But if his theory of it is that the person who took JonBenet's life did it to get at him, it was really because they were angry and jealous of him. Why did they why did they specifically target JonBenet? Why not target both children? Maybe this is just uploaded in 2016. You're right. That's what it is. It was uploaded in 2016 and re-uploaded recently. Yes, because I remember now. So obviously, this I think is, let me look up when Patsy wrote her book, because this is what that's about. Hold on a minute. Let me look at that.
Reasonable, honest, intelligent.
I clearly,
Some would say.
hold on.
Well, look,
I clearly am suffering still some brain fog due to turkey intake, because all of these things I used to know, are out of my brain at this point. Let's see. Let me look at this on Amazon. Okay, her book was in 2001. So this is after that, but before she passed away. All right, here we go.
individually, we've not met one Boulder police detective or police officer that I didn't think was a decent human being. What they lacked was experience, and they lacked leadership. There was no core wisdom that mentored these young detectives and said, wait a minute, boys, let's keep the investigation wide open. Let's look at the evidence. Let's let the evidence tell us who killed this child. Linda, I mean, you talk about the bias we were faced with. Linda Arnott, the first detective that was there all morning, said on national television, I saw it in John Ramsey's eyes that morning that he was the killer. Conclusion.
That early.
What'd you see in your eyes?
I don't know. I think she saw shock. I think she saw the eyes of a father who had just been told his daughter was dead and she was lying in front of him.
And let me say this. I don't have a fixed set theory. I can see arguments for both sides. I just want to make that clear. And I encourage everybody in my chat to express their opinions and their theories respectfully to me and to each other in the chat. So it's fine to have a different opinion. It's fine to even disagree with my opinion or disagree with something that I'm saying, as long as you're disagreeing, as long as your comments are about the part that you disagree. Don't, and none of you guys are doing this, attacking each other and saying that, Jen Lou, you're so stupid. Like, how do you not know when Patsy Ramsey passed away? You're covering this case and you don't even know, which would be the I'm not stupid, but the rest of it would be valid.
I don't know what I look like. I'm sure I looked horrible.
Mrs. Ramsey, when, going back to that morning, when did you realize that your husband had found your daughter, or that something was really, really wrong even after the ransom note? What did you hear from the basement?
I heard John scream, just kind of this guttural, deep scream.
And what did you think?
I didn't know what to think.
See, I have to say, this is the first time that I remember that I've heard this. I don't remember hearing independently. Patsy saying it is one thing, but there were other people there that day, a lot of other people in that house, and I don't remember any of them saying that they heard John scream and that it was a guttural scream. Does that mean it didn't happen? No. I have a lot of compartments in my brain, and I will tell you, the ones that never get recycled, that never get the data written over, are music lyrics, lines from movies, like ridiculous trivia stuff. Okay. Sometimes the details of crimes like these, as well known as they are, they do get overwritten. So is it possible that somebody did say they heard the same thing? Absolutely. I don't remember it. That's all. And it is really hard to remember all of the details and the dates of all the things with the Ramsey, with the JonBenet case, because like in the beginning, we got like a whole set of information, right? All at once, like over, some of it came like a lot all at once. And then it would, between 96, the end of 96 and the beginning of, 97, we were getting, a lot of information, and then it was starting to trickle. And then we had the tabloids giving the information. It wasn't like it is now where everything is, right there on the internet and you could just hit a Google, although you can, it's just in that moment, right? In that period of time. And then every so often there would be another like retrospective of the case, and other details that conflicted with earlier details would come out. And it's hard to keep all of it straight. And anybody that can keep the majority of it straight, like shout out to Humanimal and some of you other people in the chat who let me go back and look at the chat, and I'll shout you out in a minute, that can keep all of those details straight in their brain. Shout out to you, because Jen Lou can't and hasn't. Sorry, I'm doing my best.
I was in our little den with a couple of our friends, and Fleet White came running in and dialed 911. He said, "We need an ambulance." And I jumped up and said, "What is it? What is it?" And they held me back and wouldn't let me wouldn't let me go. Kept saying, we don't know. I don't know what's the problem. And I was fighting and trying to get loose.
All right. Kelly, let me shout out Kelly, who who remembers a lot of the details. I want to also shout out Keith and Patricia. You guys all are doing a fantastic job in the chat, like remembering these things and filling in the spots that I don't remember. And I really appreciate that, frankly.
And
let me go back a little bit.
Our little
wrong even after the ransom note. What did you hear from the basement?
I heard John scream, just kind of this guttural, deep scream.
And what did you think?
I didn't know what to think. I was in our little den with a couple of our friends, and Fleet White came running in and dialed 911. He said, we need an ambulance. And I jumped up and said, what is it? What is it? And they held me back and wouldn't let me go. Kept saying, we don't know. I don't know what's the problem. And I was fighting and trying to get loose and to go see what was the problem.
And what happened when you got loose?
I went into the living room, and John was standing there with Linda Arndt, and JonBenet was lying on the floor, and he said that she was dead.
Mr. Ramsey, the police officers told you, or the police detective told you to search the house. Tell us about that, please.
I don't remember exactly when it was that morning, but we were standing in the foyer of the house, and Linda Arndt asked me to take someone with me and go through the house thoroughly, look for anything that was out of the ordinary. Fleet was standing there, my friend, and we both went to the basement and first went into what we call the train room, which is where we found the open window and the suitcase up against the wall. We looked there for glass, again, to see if we could find any glass, because the window was not only open, it was broken. Then I went to the room where we did find JonBenet. The door was latched. I unlatched and pulled it open, and knew instantly what I'd found.
Tell us about that, please.
Okay, so, I mean, I don't know. I know people are very critical of the lack of what they perceive to be the lack of emotion that comes from John and Patsy when they talk about about what happened, particularly John finding JonBenet, Patsy going into the living room and seeing JonBenet, and how when they retell the story, there's like this fundamental lack of emotion. And what I will say is, oh, you're welcome, Maria. Thanks for being here. What I'll say is this. Often, people have perceived me as being very unemotional, cold, and removed, particularly when I'm talking about like true crime. Even when I talk about things that happened to me personally, like describing, that day at the funeral home with my mom. Okay. The thing it is, and I don't know John and Patsy Ramsey. Like, I don't know them as people. I only know what we've been allowed to see. Okay. But I caution people in judging too quickly about their lack of emotion or what they perceive to be a lack of emotion, because some people, it's me, some people are very, very uncomfortable with talking with being emotional in front of really anyone. I'm an extremely private person. And I didn't actually really like break down and really cry about my mom's death until 3, 4, 5 days later. It was after her funeral, and I was in the garage by myself smoking a cigarette. I was completely alone. I am private in that way, but also my children were there and my nephews were there, and I didn't want them to see me fall apart. So I held that in. And it is potentially what's going on in this situation, is that they will do anything. They're private and they're not going to cry, in front of God and everybody. It could also be that they are just exactly how some people perceive them, that they are cold. But there are things that they do when they're talking about it. Like, I'll show you. Hold on a second, because it's Patsy that does it. All right. It's like right here. Hold on, let me see.
JonBenet was lying on the floor, and he said that she was dead.
It's right there. It's like saying those words is so hard for her. And it's almost like there's like that hard swallow, and then you can see her tongue is moving on her teeth inside of her mouth. It's like those words are bitter and distasteful, and that she hates saying it so much that it like leaves a bad taste in her mouth. That's kind of, to me, that's like a micro expression of what happens when people die like this. It is against the laws of nature for a parent to bury their child. That's number one. On top of that, for the parent to have to bury their child because they were murdered is like a second strike against the laws of nature. And I would imagine that in both circumstances, that there is a level of sadness mixed with anger. Also, let me just say, as I live and breathe, Mo Dean in the chat. Where you been, buddy? It's been a minute. It's good to see you. Good to see you. So that's how it feels to me. I feel like there is emotion, there is sorrow, there is grief that they express, but it's just not the way that most people, they're not criers. That's all.
Mr. Ramsey, the police officers told you, or the police detective told you to search the house. Tell us about that, please.
I don't remember exactly when it was that morning, but we were standing in the foyer of the house, and
Hang on a minute. This is a very, I agree with this statement, and it's quite astute from our Mo Dean. Mo says, they can be cold or act strange, but their story over time is inconsistent, and certain things they don't answer. They answer, but they don't really answer the question. I would 100% agree with this. There are inconsistencies, and if they were on the stand and testifying, and they gave their non-answer answer to some of these questions, as an attorney, if I were an attorney, I would have to object, and the grounds would be unresponsive. Because I do feel like there are times that does happen. I agree with that.
and Linda Arndt asked me to take someone with me and go through the house thoroughly, look for anything that was out of the ordinary. Fleet was standing there, my friend, and we both went to the basement.
Hang on just 1 second. So I just want to take this opportunity to remind people that are just joining us, please, 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 when you be careful what you write in the chat. I'm not trying to get sued. Make sure that when you do type a theory into the chat that you include that it's your opinion. And I would also like to take this opportunity to say this. Any views, opinions, theories expressed in this chat do not necessarily reflect the views of the channel owner and the host of the Word Case Studies, Jen Liu. I ain't trying to get sued, y'all. Here we go.
And first went into what we call the train room, which is where we found the open window and the suitcase up against the wall. We looked there for glass, again, to see if we could find any glass, because the window was not only open, it was broken. Then I went to the room where we did find JonBenet. The door was latched. I unlatched and pulled it open, and instantly what I found.
Tell us about that, please.
Well, it was a rush of relief, but also fear, because her eyes were closed.
So Patricia asks, the Word Case Studies, do you know the case of a girl who goes missing when she gets a ride from a friend after leaving her dad's band practice? No, like, it's not ringing any bells. But listen, I don't think anything would be ringing any bells right now. Like, I still feel like I'm in a little bit of, like, I have some kind of tryptophan-induced brain fog. So let me ponder that, and maybe I can figure it out. All right. Let me rewind this just a scotch.
Well, it was a rush of relief, but also fear, because her eyes were closed. I immediately took the tape off of her mouth, tried to untie her arms were bound above her head. I tried to untie the knot, and I couldn't get it untied. Her skin was cool to the touch, and I picked her up, and that's when I screamed, because I was, I guess, just realizing that things were not going to be okay after all.
And things never have been since.
No, they never will be. We've lost our child. It's never going to be the same.
When is it that you finally came to the reality that there are people who do things like this?
That day.
That day.
You read about crime in the paper, and you think, well, there must have been a reason, or it's not going to happen to you. And you kind of, we see so much crime on television. I think we almost put real crime in the same category as kind of make-believe that happens in a different world. This happened in our world, and for no reason that we know of. I hope that I have never done anything that has made someone so angry with me that they would kill my daughter. We don't think we know anybody that's this evil.
But somewhere along the way,
But our paths crossed with this creature. Somehow we got in their sights.
I don't think it was a random act.
No,
I
this
think
person didn't just walk by our house that evening and decide to come in there. This was well thought out.
What do you think, Mrs. Ramsey? What do you think happened?
All right. I don't, okay. If we're going with the intruder theory and the outsider theory, I don't think what was done to JonBenet was done because of anything that John or Patsy Ramsey did. I don't think that they were the target. Because it feels like if they were the target, if it was because they'd made them so angry, Why would they choose only JonBenet, or why choose JonBenet in the first place? Why not Burke? There was another child in the home. To me, it does feel like this has to do with the target was JonBenet, not the Ramseys, not the family. I don't know. It's something about that doesn't. Yeah, Aqua Hearts. I mean, unsub. I don't know what to tell you. All I'm saying is I don't. It's fine to have your own opinion, but obviously, I don't think I need to tell anybody that they're entitled to an opinion. I think that that's obvious. But my point is that when in the chat, I would prefer it if you write that is your opinion, because the that's your opinion, and I that's just a small request. I'm not saying that you can't have that opinion. I'm not arguing with your opinion. Just asking you to please write that that's your opinion. Hey, Woofy.
Did he stalk you that day?
I don't. There must have been something like that. From what we talked with people who have experience in this, and they say that it was premeditated, that this person knew of us. May not have been a close acquaintance, but knew about us, knew about John's business, knew that we had children, and I believe was watching the house that day. And when we left in the afternoon, he came in.
How long do you think this person was in the house, Mr. Ramsey?
They certainly could have been in the house for 4 or 5 hours while we were gone. I don't know when they came in.
Do you think the person was in the house before you left?
I don't think before we left.
I don't think so. I think they came into the house after we left. Were there when we came home. Waited till we fell asleep. One of our neighbors reported seeing a flashlight light in the kitchen around midnight, I believe.
The beam of flashlight shining.
None of this, it's so cruel, but none of it makes sense.
Look, this person...
So to answer your question, Leslie, yes, I do. Because of the garrote and because of the results that were found during her autopsy. Because if you think about if all that was done state to stage, I'll give you an example of the Preppy murder back in the 80s in New York. And the victim in that case was found, and the way that she was found, just looking at her, it appeared outwardly, right, that what had happened to her was that she had been assaulted, essayed, and then murdered. But when they took her for autopsy, there was no evidence of that. So I feel like if this were something that were done to cover up or to stage something, why go that far? It feels like I don't know. I just think that for staging purposes or some attempt at covering up, right? If you are going with somebody inside the home, that's a step too far.
Is a monster. It's a subhuman. This person doesn't think like you and I do. This person is not going to make sense.
I mentioned to you before that I wanted you to look at the ransom note again and just go over what you know about the ransom note with us, if I can find it. Well, I would take it out with a great flourish, but I need to get out of that tablet. Hold on a second. I just think it would be helpful.
So to answer 1 hour dry floors, are Patsy and John a couple decades apart in age? Yes. I think that John has said that when he met Patsy, she was 23 and he was, I think, closer to 40. Okay, so Kelly knows. Kelly says they were like 15 years apart. So yeah, 30. I think he said I think she was 23 and he was like 38, if I remember correctly. And yes, Little Red is correct. This is his second family after, yeah. So he had, yeah, this is.
If you can hear what you know about it. It's right there.
Right.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hey, Toe Beans. This is a good point too. Toe Beans says, coming in from the bushes to say, isn't Patsy a former beauty pageant girl and she's Southern? Maybe she is trained to not show emotion. Well, I will say that speaking from somebody who was not in the beauty pageant world, but like I didn't participate in it, but I had lots of friends who did. They are, especially when they're like way older, it's a little more, there's that interview portion and they do receive coaching on how to, and how to respond to interviews. It's part of it. And they will, in part of that coaching, they will throw like off the wall questions out so that you will learn not to show that you're uncomfortable with the question or that because sometimes when a person gets thrown a question that's just like, what? It's like a natural response with your body, right? To sort of react to that. Like, what did you just ask me? Like, it makes no sense. And that comes across in the pageant world especially in the interview portion, obviously, as you're not confident and you're not confident in your answer, those things. So it can be seen as a negative. So they coach them how to like not appear to be shocked. Right. So yes, that is true. And as far as being Southern, it's not okay. Yes, there are some things that are like unique to the South, right? The twang, the different meaning of bless your heart. There are some things that are part of Southern hospitality, but Southern hospitality doesn't mean that that anybody who isn't from the South isn't hospitable. Like, it's just, it's not like the South is like a sovereign nation. You know what I mean? Like, it's, I think it has less to do with being from the South and more to do with the generation. I will say, everybody knows when I was born, I'm a Gen Xer. And it isn't so much that part of it is I was raised this way. Like whenever I would have a conversation with my dad, if I was upset about something, if I was emotional when I was talking about it, like crying, it's mainly crying, it meant that I was irrational. This is my perception. To me, it meant that I was irrational and therefore my argument should be dismissed because I'm not thinking clearly. Okay, so I learned to be able to control my emotions in that way. But I also learned from the rules of the playground. All right. I learned very quickly in school that if somebody said something to you, like, cut you down in some type of way, and you reacted to it, you cried or you got upset, then that person would always know how to get at you. And they would do it over and over and over again. So I learned how to not react. For example, I will never forget this. I was in 5th grade. I came in from recess, and all of the girls in the class had moved their desks away from mine. And I was like in the middle of the classroom, like on an island by myself. Now, I was upset about it. It hurt my feelings. Of course, who wouldn't? However, what I chose to do was to come in from recess and sit there at my desk all by myself. And not only did I do that, I said, good. Now I don't have to keep explaining things to you because you guys don't get it. Chose to be something like rude. And so I think that is generational. And that might be, I think with Patsy and John, I think it's a combination of many things. I think what makes people that we're not all things at once all the time, right? And our motivations for doing things or having a certain behavior or having a certain reaction or are layered, and our perspectives are layered. There's many reasons why I see something one way and somebody else sees the exact same thing a completely different way. Our perceptions and our perspectives are shaped by our experiences. And so I think there's a lot of that. I think there's many layers and facets that go into not just John and Patsy Ramsey, but everybody and why they act or respond in different ways.
One of the most unusual parts of this has been this ransom note, and I know that you've seen it several times, but would you go over it with us and tell us what you know and what you've been told about it?
Well, first of all, this is what is going to help us convict the killer. This is 3 pages of handwritten writing samples of the killer. We've been told by experts that if we have a suspect and we get sufficient samples of his writing, they will be able to tell conclusively with this much of a sample that the person wrote that note. So this is a huge clue. Why it was left, I don't know.
And let me just interject at this point. Mrs. Ramsey, it's my understanding that the Colorado Bureau of Investigation took your handwriting samples to the Secret Service. Do you know the results of that test? Definitively?
No, I don't. I just know we had experts do the same kind of testing, and it's my understanding that the people that we used trained the people from the CBI, Colorado Bureau, that administered the tests. And they, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being absolutely no match, I ranked at a 4.5, with 1 being a perfect match. So,
Yeah, we don't know the results of the police testing. We've heard that they're at best inconclusive.
The governor said this morning on national TV that you've seen all the evidence in the case.
I would be desperate. If there is evidence we haven't seen, I would ask the governor to please let us see it. Please let our investigators see it.
What is it that you want to do with regard to this case?
What we are desperate to have happen now, we've gone for 3 years, only my family's been investigated. The grand jury refused to indict us, and it takes very little evidence to indict someone. All we've done is gotten back to the beginning, but we don't want it to be the end. I'd like for political ambitions to be put aside. I'd like for egos to be put aside. There are no apologies needed, but let's get on with an investigation. Let's staff this investigation with seasoned, experienced homicide investigators, the best we can find, the best we can.
How do we know that it's just because you don't like the outcome of what Boulder police have decided, that you're under an umbrella of suspicion, that you just want another chance?
They can investigate us. If the governor would put together a seasoned investigative team to start over, go back through all the leads, all the evidence, we'd
They
be
can start
fully
all over
cooperative.
again. Right.
And they can investigate us again if they want. That's fine. But please don't just investigate us, because if you do, we're never going to find the killer.
There is lots of evidence. There is a lot of evidence.
The Boulder police did a wonderful job of collecting evidence. Thank goodness.
And that doesn't change. Evidence is evidence. We've got it.
We've got
But we
DNA
need
that
to
hasn't
follow
been
the
identified.
evidence and do some follow-up investigating, not just dead end with John and Patsy Ramsey.
Let's go over the ransom note. What do you know, what have people told you about phrasing or anything else in the ransom note?
Well, there's obviously a couple of references, I think, to something that people think came from a movie, couple of movies, which would lend one to think that it might be maybe a younger person who watches a lot of movies.
Are you surprised that there are no swear words in there? I mean, if there's
Yeah.
a huge degree of hatred for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
No, that is surprising. Nor is JonBenet's name mentioned. All they say is, "We have your daughter." They don't say, "We have JonBenet."
Yeah, which makes me wonder, if it's someone that did not know us well enough to know what her name was.
But we've been told that there's a lot of movie talk in here. This person liked movies. They may have seen the movie Ransom, which was playing in Boulder
At the time.
at the time.
And there were some similarities between Ransom and your life in terms of the profile of the people involved. The billionaire. Have you ever seen the movie Ransom?
No, I haven't seen the movie.
Okay. Well then.
Okay. So I'll also say that I forgot what I was going to say. Shoot. Let me listen and it'll come back to me. Sorry, you guys. I had an important point to make and now it just poof.
Yeah, I've been told that it's very similar.
I remember. Okay. So the important point that I had to make is this ransom note. Okay. Clearly, okay, if we're going with an outsider theory, all right, clearly the ransom note was an attempt at making it appear something that it wasn't. And the only thing that I can think of that, or probably not the only thing, but the one thing that stands out to me personally about the ransom note and what the motive behind it may have been, would have been to delay JonBenet's body from being found. So if that's the case, then why have her body in the home? That's the part that has never, that the ransom note is like an issue for me, because clearly the person that wrote it had no intention of keeping JonBenet alive. They were not actually intending on collecting the ransom note. And when did this ransom note get written in the first place? Was the ransom note written prior to going upstairs, taking JonBenet out of her bed and taking her down into the cellar and doing all of the things and then leaving? Or was the ransom note written afterwards? Because why would you write it afterwards and not take her body? If you know? So I think that one of the reasons why the Ramseys believe this intruder theory is that because they were gone for such an extended period of time, that a person who came into the home while they were gone would have had time to write such an extensive note. I just don't, that note has never made sense to me, and I don't understand what the point of it really was from an intruder theory point of view. Because like I said, it would seem to me that if it was a diversion tactic, the diversion would be to make it look like it was something that it wasn't, to stave off finding JonBenet's body, right? So why leave the body in the home? If you are trying to trick law enforcement into thinking that what they're looking for is a live child, because there's a different protocol, right, between a kidnapping for ransom and a stranger abduction. Just they treat them differently. So this doesn't make sense to me. This is the note has never made sense to me, and I've never understood it, and I probably won't ever understand it unless this case is solved and somebody is arrested, tried, and convicted. Because it's not going to be enough just for somebody to be arrested, in my opinion. For me, I'm going to need there to be a trial so I can see all of the evidence and know all of the things.
Apparently there's Clint Eastwood movie lines in this thing. We don't watch movies that much, so I was perplexed at why 118,000. Why not $1 million? I mean, why not? If this, but there's only this
number.
madman knows why.
And of course, the supposition was that that was the amount of your bonus.
That was a supposition I put forward early on as I looked back to try to figure out what that number meant. I offered that up to the police and said this possibly could be the case. I don't know that it was. Who knows? I mean, only the killer knows, and this is a deranged individual.
Okay, so the movie that they're talking about, Ransom, is it's got Gary Sinise, Mel Gibson, Rene Russo, and Lily. Oh gosh, I cannot. I know her name is Lily. She's the mom from. She's been in a ton of movies. She was in Ransom. She was in The Haunting. She was in the first Conjuring movie. And basically, what happens is Mel Gibson and Rene Russo are a wealthy couple. Their son is kidnapped, held for ransom, and rather than pay the ransom, they turn the tables on the kidnappers and put a bounty out on the kidnappers. No, not Lily Tomlin. Hold on, let me just freaking Google out. Give me just a second. It'll come to me. Let me just Google out. Lily Taylor. That's who it is. So that's what movie they're talking about. And Googling, the movie came out November 8th, 1996. It's a good movie. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Check it out.
Mrs. Ramsey, how many times did you have to write and read this note?
Oh, I think I gave 5 or 6 handwriting samples.
And they were extensive. We wrote and rewrote this note, which was terribly
Right-handed,
painful.
left-handed, with different pens, different, angles, everything.
Did they ask you to read the note?
No, when the test was administered, they would verbally dictate what I was to write, and it was rather fast, so you didn't have time, I guess, to,
Okay, I will say this. On the Behavior Panels channel, this is the interview that they analyzed of Patsy Ramsey. And one of the parts that they analyze is the part that precedes this part, where Patsy Ramsey is talking about the people that their experts that the family used that analyzed the handwriting samples are the people that trained the people at the CBI. And their commentary about that specific part of the interview is very, very interesting. And while I push play on this, I will go and get the links to the one that they premiered yesterday and the one from 2 years ago, so you guys can watch it, because I thought it was quite interesting, the things that they had to say.
try to think about how you were making your letters. You just had to write as you always write to keep up.
What do you think happened in your version of when the intruder broke in, how the intruder broke in, when the intruder wrote the ransom note, and when the intruder kidnapped JonBenet? And do you think that the intruder wanted to actually take her out of the house, was actually going to kidnap her?
We've been told by seasoned investigators that this is what it appeared. It is what it appeared. It was an attempted kidnapping. Something went very badly wrong. We believe that the killer was in the house when we came home. We believe the note was written before JonBenet was killed. Whether it was before we got home or after we went to bed, we don't know. I have strong reason to believe that the killer either entered or left the house through the basement window that we found open, and we found a hard Samsonite suitcase flush up against the wall as if it were a step to get out of the window. The window was probably 5 feet off the floor, so you had to step on something to get out. That's my best guess at how at least they got out. They would have needed the suitcase to get out of that window.
How do you think they were going to get her out of the house, or he?
We've been told that the suitcase may have been involved.
Okay, let's take a short break here to switch teams. What eliminates you as suspects?
I don't know if anything eliminates us. I don't know that we'll ever be able to prove our innocence. First of all, we shouldn't have to prove our innocence. One of the things we've lost in this society, I believe, is the presumption of innocence. We've been told by the police, prove to us you're innocent and we'll be the first to say it. And we were aghast at that kind of a statement. But we've lost that in this country. But the fact
I think there is an element of truth to that statement that John just said about we have a little bit lost the presumption of innocence in this country. I think that there are some cases, and it seems to me that it is cases involving children specifically, where most of us immediately side eye, usually the parents. And I think the reason that isn't so much that although it does go to we've lost the presumption of innocence in this country. I suppose that argument could be made, but I actually think it has more to do with the fact that many, many, many times when it involves the murder of a child, it has come out in so many cases that the parents are behind it. And I think that what we really have happening to us as a society is we've become jaded. It is not as abhorrent and shocking as it is that a parent is capable of doing this and does do this. I think for us, especially in the true crime community, really, it's not surprising that overwhelmingly, statistically, stranger abductions, and obviously this is dependent on many factors. The younger the child, right? Statistically, the odds of it being a stranger abduction and murder are decreased, because the younger the child, the smaller their circle, the fewer people that have access to them. Obviously, that is dependent on circumstances. For example, if the family dynamic is such that there is a lot of parties held at the home. Well, obviously, if there's frequent partying at a home with, multiple, people coming to these parties, all this, what I'm trying to get at. Like, that's then obviously there's more people that have access to the children in that home than your average. Obviously, statistics are not hard, fast. They're like the pirate code. They're guidelines. So I think that, and I also think that some of it has to do with how we get our information currently versus how we got our information in the early 90s, and then, the 80s and the 70s and the 60s. Okay. Obviously now in 2024, we have news channels that run 24/7. So our ability to access news has changed. We don't have to just watch the 5 o'clock and the 6 o'clock local news and the 10 o'clock local news, and then the 5:30. This is how it was when I was a kid. 5:30, like national news, right? Or world news. Okay. Now we have, news channels that run all the time. And now in 2024, not only do we have 24-hour news channels, but we also have people like me who are on social media platforms who discuss, all kinds of things, not just true crime, just all types of news, all types of things that are going on in the world around us. So I feel like, our everything, it's different now than it was. And Neat Noodle, thank you, babe. I appreciate that. Thank you for gifting a membership. I appreciate that so much. Thank you for supporting me in the channel. And if you were the person who got that membership, which it was 1 hour dry floors, got the gifted membership by Neat Noodle, please be sure to thank Neat Noodle. That was generous, and I appreciate you. And it made me jump. I always forget that stream that I set up these noises that are notifications, the alerts, and I was all the way into my sermon, and I was startled by the notification. Although I love being fancy with these, I'm still not quite used to them. All right. Thank you, Neat Noodle. I appreciate that, babe. All right, here we go.
Fact of the matter is, the only thing that will prove our innocence is when we find the killer. And there's still going to be 10% of the population that says, oh yeah, but I don't believe that. They still are the guilty ones. There are still people on the web who believe Charles Lindbergh killed his child and that the whole trial was a hoax. So we're never going to convince the cynics of anything. But that doesn't matter. Proving our innocence isn't important. Never has been.
Finding
what
the
is important
killer
is finding the killer of
is
our daughter.
important.
Do you think that'll happen?
Absolutely.
Yes, I do.
Why, Mrs. Ramsey?
Because Lou Smith, who is experienced, is a truthful, ethical man, looked me straight in the eye and said, we're going to get him. We're going to find him. And I'm holding out hope for that.
Mrs. Ramsey, if I could, tell me your version of what you think happened that night in terms of an intruder. And I know you've been over this 100 times, but if we could hear it from you, please.
Well, I think that when we left in the late afternoon to go to the Whites for dinner, that possibly this person was watching our house, watched us leave, and came into the house at that time. So there was a window of several hours of time where he could have familiarized himself with the house, where JonBenet's bedroom was, where our bedroom was, where the basement was, before we returned home. I believe that the ransom note was probably very likely written at that time. We had paper and pens all over the place, so they were available. And then I think the person was there when we returned home that night.
And the ransom note was already written.
I believe it was. I mean, it's very unusual for a ransom note to be this long. From what we understand from professionals we've talked with, that
I mean, to be fair, I don't really think that you need to be a professional to think that have the opinion that a 3-page long ransom note written on paper written on paper from a notebook that came from inside the Ramseys' home would be unusual on multiple levels. First of all, a 3-page ransom note would be unusual just on its face. That's super long. Then you have the fact that it was written at, using paper from a notebook from inside the home. And then you have the fact that it was written at all period in the first place because there was never going to be a ransom. And I already stated this, why I think it's why I've never understood the point of the ransom note and why the ransom note is part of the reason that leans to me away from the intruder and more towards potentially somebody inside the home. But if I really break down all the things that in this case, known things that are fact, okay, not conjecture, not opinion, just straight fact. If I really take all of those things and line them up into 2 columns, one being the intruder theory and one being a person from inside the home, right? In my mind, those columns are pretty equal. To me, there isn't an overwhelming number of facts that support an intruder or an overwhelming number of facts that support somebody inside the house. Patricia Burns says, that noise makes me think of a row of medieval longbow snipers. That is a very specific description. And I like it. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. I just want to hear what their theories of the case are, and then we'll call it for the day. How's that sound, y'all?
After someone commits such a crime as this, they, get the heck out of there. So.
We've also been told by experienced people that not even a serial killer could sit down and write a 3-page ransom note after they've killed.
And why would that be?
I don't know.
I don't know that.
But I think it's because this is an emotional climax for them, and to sit down and write what probably took a while, because it obviously was written to attempt to disguise the handwriting.
Kelly, I did not know that. Kelly says the consultant does a great podcast in 2003 with 2 FBI agents analyzing the ransom note. If anyone gets a chance to listen, I absolutely will listen to that, because I want to hear all the things. I'm pretty much just nosy. So I just want to hear all the things.
A 3-page note, which I think this is either the longest or the second longest ransom note in the history of this country. That couldn't have been done after just murdering a child by anyone. We're told.
Talk to us a little bit about that, Mrs. Ramsey. Your child's been killed brutally, and then someone writes out this ransom note. Why do you think that that's not feasible? Why do you think it was written before?
Because I have been told by people who are experienced in this field that.
Okay, let me just say something. Patsy, rest in peace, babe. But I got to say, this is why. 2023, Kelly. Okay, I will definitely check it out. Thank you for letting us know that. I will say this. It's that behavior right there. It's that, because I was told, it does come off haughty and condescending. It just does. It just does. Was that her intention? I don't know, but that's how it comes off, which kind of actually makes me think that if they were coached, they weren't coached very well. Mo. Okay, so Mo Dean says, ask them about the pineapple and JonBenet's small intestines. Patsy said, I don't know where that bowl came from with her and Burke's fingerprints on it. She did address that in this interview, and I played it. She says, this is what she says. All I'm saying is, and she puts her hand to her chest because you can hear it hit the microphone. She says, all I'm saying is I did not give JonBenet pineapple when she got home, or that night. That's what she said. That was her answer. Yes. Mm-hmm. She did address that. But it's this tone, and it's all of it. It's not just what she's saying. It's how she's saying it. It's what her body is doing when she's saying it. It just comes off like, bruh. People, okay, I can understand how annoying it would be if I were a person, if my child was murdered and I absolutely 100% unequivocally had absolutely nothing to do with it. Okay. I could understand, and I would be annoyed. I think that would be the bare minimum of my emotions, and thoughts regarding that, right? Being accused. Annoyance would be one of them. Anger, frustration, all of those things. Okay. I would be irritated and annoyed that I continued to be accused. And so on one level, like, I kind of understand that, but at the same time, the reason that people are profoundly drawn to cases like this is because it involves a child, and when children are murdered, it impacts society in a very different way than when it is an adult. And I think that the majority of the people who feel very strongly one way or the other as far as John and Patsy Ramsey or anybody else in that house's guilt or innocence, it is because they're so profoundly disturbed and upset by what happened to JonBenet, and they want justice. It comes from a good place. And so while I understand why Patsy is annoyed by it and irritated by it and over it, I also wish that she would remember it's because people care. It's coming from a good place, even though it affects them negatively.
That is usually the way it happens. I have no previous knowledge about these kind of things, but we have been, in conversation and in
We think about this every day.
every day. And we've sought out, the top people in the field that know about how the criminal mind works. And this is what we're going on. The profile that's in the book, all of that information is not from John and from me. This is from people that know what they're doing.
One thing that I would actually, if I had the opportunity to just me by myself, and obviously I can't, but sit down with Patsy and John and ask questions. One of the things that I'm going to go back because we're going to cover this topic a little bit more because now it's got me thinking about things. One thing that I haven't, or I don't recall them being asked or them freely volunteering, is their list of shoulda, woulda, couldas. And I'm curious about their list of shoulda, woulda, couldas. Like I remember Amber Hagerman's mom, Donna, saying some of her shoulda, woulda, couldas were I wish I wouldn't have given in. I wish I wouldn't have let Amber and her brother go ride their bikes. Or, there things like that. So I'm just curious what their shoulda, woulda, couldas would be. Because I don't recall offhand, and maybe you guys in the chat can help a girl out, but I don't recall them ever saying any shoulda, woulda, couldas.
The intruder took your daughter downstairs and could not get her out of the house. Is that what you suspect?
That is what we've been told is a likely scenario by experienced investigators. Yes.
When someone also said that typically the body is left in the house if the perpetrator doesn't have any place to take the person.
Well, if we're going to talk about behavior of the perpetrator, I will say this. The fact that JonBenet was found covered in a blanket, statistically, the only people that do that kind of thing are the people who know the victim. It's an odd, weird act of remorse, and they don't want to look. So, I mean, that is there's some statistics for you. The covering of a victim indicates a personal relationship with the victim. Like, kind of like the way Dee Dee Blanchard was all tucked in and covered up when she was found, all tucked in, covered up, and had a Barney stuffed animal or stuffed plush next to her, right at the top of her head. Mm-hmm. like that.
to,
And what
to
does that
hold
mean
them.
to you?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what that means other than that, he didn't want to take the body home with him or in his car or wherever. So
Also, for another example, um, Christopher Roden Sr. was also covered. I'm just going to leave that there.
she was left in the house.
How is it that you are able to sit here and talk about the body when it's your daughter?
I have to kind of put it in a clinical perspective rather than emotionally when I can to talk about it like this.
We have a strong faith in our.
I mean, that's a good explanation. I mean, there is an element of compartmentalization that has to occur in order for a parent to be able to carry on in some way, shape, or form. And some people, some human beings, just generally speaking, are better able to compartmentalize things than others. So, like, there's some things that they do, the Ramseys, that I sort of understand, like why they do it and the need for it. Compartmentalizing is one of those things, and compartmentalizing, just generally speaking, is a coping mechanism. Like, it's not easy for me to talk about cases that involve murdered children. In fact, those are the cases for me personally, that are the hardest to talk about, because it's a child, and that you can tell the cases that impact me involving children, the ones that impact me harder than others, like Quentin Simon and Gannon Stauch. And a lot of that has to do with just, there's something about Gannon and Quentin that reminds me of my boys. And so, it's, I think that's, and so there, when I talk about the actual case, I do have to compartmentalize a little bit, and compartmentalizing is a coping mechanism. We do it all the time in our daily lives that we probably don't even realize when we're doing it.
Our Christian faith assures us that JonBenet is safe. She's in God's arms, in God's care, and we believe that. We know that. That's our belief, and that's our hope.
What about your daughter Beth and your daughter JonBenet? What do you hope?
I know I will see them again. That's what I know, and I believe that, and I look forward to it.
Mrs. Ramsey?
JonBenet used to say, we talked to JonBenet about Beth. Of course, she was just an infant when Beth was killed in the automobile accident. I remember one time holding her on my lap in an airplane, and she looked out at all the puffy clouds out the airplane window, and she said, "Mommy, which cloud is Beth on?" And I took that opportunity to explain to her about God and about heaven and where we go and where we die, and that we would all see Beth again, and then that we would know where she is. So I believe Beth was there to greet JonBenet when she crossed over into heaven.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. But I will say that, this case, of so many of them like this that are so incredibly sad, and it is my hope that this case is resolved, and that whoever did this to JonBenet, as well as anybody that participated in it in any way, shape, or form, is brought to justice. I think JonBenet deserves that. And I will also say that, excuse me, one of the things that when people have spoken about JonBenet, is a couple of things. One, that the pageant part of her life was such a small part of her life, but it was made into something bigger than what it was, as if that was all she did. And that there are many beautiful pictures of JonBenet in the pageants that you can find on the internet. But for the thumbnail for this live, I chose a not pageant picture for her because I think that is more representative of who she was. And more often than not, she's just a little 6-year-old girl. And the other thing that people have said about JonBenet is that she was an incredibly sensitive child, that she worried about how other people were feeling, and that she would try to, if she saw people, especially her mom, when her mom was going through the first round of cancer treatment, how she would try to comfort her mom and make her laugh. And that's, that she was just a kid that just, would try to, if you were upset, she'd try to make you happy. And so, yeah, anyway, I want to thank you guys all for being here very, very much. Thank you for spending this Friday morning with me. Just to let you know, I do have the Sarah Boone thing that I'm working on. So I intended to have it done today, but then I decided to go live about JonBenet. And so it'll probably be done today. I just don't know when it'll be done today. But keep an eye out for that. I'll tell you this, it will definitely be done before sentencing. Okay. Because you have to watch this before sentencing. That's just that. I don't know if I will be live later or tonight. I do intend to go live over the weekend because there is a new trial that will be starting on Monday that I want to cover. So I'll be doing that this weekend so that whenever trial starts Monday, you guys will know all the things you need to know about the case leading up to the trial. Not too much because, I am familiar with the case somewhat. I remember it, but I don't want to this trial is, it's not going to be like with Leilani Simon or Sarah Boone, where I know all the things, I followed all the things, been following all of the things, and I already have my mind made up. This is going to be one of those where I haven't made up my mind quite yet. So it's been a while since we've done something like that. I mean, Chloe Driver was one. I still don't have my mind made up. We got to, but anyway, that's all I had for you guys tonight or this afternoon. Thank you guys for spending your time with me for almost 3 hours. I appreciate it so, so much. You guys have a great rest of your Friday, and I will see you all later. Bye.
Cause it's Friday, you ain't got no job, and you ain't got shit to do. Well, fuck you.
No malicious intent or effort was No militia. Finish her!
Minutes later.
We all do a little mad sometimes.